Hey guys, I've got my latest experiment with growing cuttings here, and I wanted to go through it and review how it did. These are, again, white mulberry, and so first I'll talk about what I did differently versus previous experiments with cuttings. So they are all, again, small cuttings, but this time I kept them inside with my grow station where I can control the heat and humidity a little bit more than I can outside. And I covered the top to further control their moisture loss. And I used a better growing medium. I used the coconut coir, and I have them in a tray of water to continually bottom water. And so some of them were like really obvious that they took early on. This one, until I think yesterday, held on to its leaf for like 2 weeks, and every time I've done rooted cuttings, they drop their leaves like within a day or two. But this one, until yesterday, held on to its leaf. So I'm curious to see how that one has done. This one, as you can see, has leafed out. And so this one was one of the ones that dropped all its leaves, but it has grown new leaves. And I can show you that it's got roots coming out the bottom. So it has definitely done the thing. So what I want to do now is kind of take a look at the others and see what they have done. So these ones are beginning to leaf here, and I am not really seeing that activity on the others. And if you give it like a very gentle tug and it doesn't give, that's probably a good sign that it has begun to root. I don't see any roots coming out the drainage holes. So on these ones, this one does give a lot. So I might pull that out and see if it's done anything. This was the larger cutting, so it's possible that it just didn't want to root. I should have mentioned up front too that I have started using rooting hormone for my cuttings, just because it helps a little bit, it seems, and anything that helps is good. This one gives a bit too. So I don't want to pull them out if it's obvious that they've taken, but so I'll go ahead and pull this one out, the big one. Let's see what it did. So it did nothing, actually. And you might even say there's signs that this has begun to rot. Yeah, I think it has. So this cutting did not take, unfortunately. And it does look like the stem, or this branch, is like beginning to dry up. Like you can kind of tell in the texture versus the other ones. But this is the one that held onto the leaf until yesterday. And it does, texture-wise, look more like it's alive. Oh, here we go. I can actually see it has a little bud coming up right there and right there in a few spots. So just to satisfy my curiosity, I am going to pull this one out and see what's going on here. If I can get my plastic wrap off. So this one has not rooted either. So that's interesting. But the moisture has kept it alive up to this point. So what I may do is apply more rooting hormone and see if it helps. But that is an interesting bit to this experiment. Because as I said, this one held on to its leaf for the longest, so I thought this one was going to be the one that rooted the fastest. But I guess that is not necessarily the case. So I will probably transition this one outside soon. So this one was the smallest, as you can see, and it was still green when I put it in here. So that's something that can help with the rooting. If it's a soft wood and even still green, then that's a more likelihood that it will take when you're trying to root it. It looks like I'm finally going to have some mulberries growing from cutting here, because I thought that my original round of cuttings from this tree would take, but they behaved similar to what this one is doing, in that they had foliage, like a little bit of some signs of foliage and signs of life. But then eventually when I checked on the roots, there were no roots. So it was just hanging on, but not rooting. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind when you're trying to do cuttings. So up to this point, I have not been using the wounding technique when doing my cuttings, but I'm going to try it with this one. As you can see, I kind of peeled back some of the cambium layer and exposed a bit of the inside of the cutting, and I'm going to do that and then apply the rooting hormone and then put it back in the growing medium. So you'll have to pardon me if this is standard procedure for rooting cuttings for certain things, because I have not tried it up to this point. I have had limited success with cuttings, so each new technique I add into the mix here, I am curious, very curious, to see how they help. So if this one now suddenly goes gangbusters because this really helped, then it'll be obvious what was the cause. So I am curious to see what happens.